Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're going to look at the next psalm. Here's Psalm 30. I will exalt you, Lord, because you have lifted me up and have not allowed my enemies to triumph over me. Lord, my God, I cried to you for help and you healed me. Lord, you brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. Sing to the Lord, you his faithful ones, and praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor a lifetime. Weeping may stay overnight, but there is joy in the morning. When I was secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Lord, when you showed your favor, you made me stand like a strong mountain. When you hid your face, I was terrified. Lord, I called to you. I sought favor from my Lord. What gain is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it proclaim your truth? Lord, listen and be gracious to me. Lord, be my helper. You turned my lament into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, so that I can sing to you and not be silent. Lord my God, I will praise you forever. All right, there it is again. Do you see these themes that we're spotting throughout all the Psalms? They always include that I'm a worship, bottom line. Whether the psalmist is facing a massive army or swimming through his money like Scrooge McDuck on the 90s original DuckTales. I'm a worship. I'm just going to praise Jesus. I got to sing out to God. I got to tell him how great he is. I got to thank him from the bottom of my heart because he has delivered me from the pit of Sheol itself. You see that in the text. And 500 points to Gryffindor if you can tell me why that's there. Okay? Why would an Old Testament text describe resurrection? Go for it. Why? What is this psalm doing? Okay, if you haven't figured it out yet, if you're a rookie just now joining our study in the Psalms, don't worry, it's okay. It's not like you just tuned in to Lost starting in season 4. Psalms are much more self-explanatory than that. You can jump into a series halfway through the Psalms, and you don't really need to know Psalms 1 through 75. You can jump right into Psalm 76 and fully grasp what the text is saying. Unless you're just like really, really dumb. They're pretty straightforward. They're songs, but their significance is that they're prophetic about Jesus. They're written centuries before the birth of Christ, and they even have these detailed descriptions about crucifixion centuries before the Roman Empire even adapted and in the darkest sense of the word, perfected crucifixion. And they're about Jesus being crucified before anybody was really crucified that way. They're locked in. We know the age of these Psalms, and we know that they were written long before crucifixion. And we know that they didn't inspire crucifixion either, because they weren't held to or read or believed by the people who really perfected crucifixion. Again, in the darkest sense of the word, perfected. They took this form of death and they made it worse. And they reserved it for the most grotesquely offensive criminals. Doesn't that grind your gears that that's the kind of death by which they killed the perfect Savior who fed thousands of people, who told blind people to see and they did, who told, who healed lepers, who healed paralytics? Like, that's the one that they crucified? All of this we can see prophesied in the text. And in the Psalms, we have these moments that I believe are prophetic of the gospel. Lord, you brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. This is a psalm of David. David's talked about this pit before. And he talked about it in a way that drew from the greatest source of pain a man can feel, the death of his child. David had royally messed up, committed adultery, committed murder to cover it up, committed treason in the process, implicated all of his officers and everybody who left Uriah standing there on the field of battle alone to be killed so that David wouldn't have to deal with the fact that he had impregnated Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, while Uriah was off doing what David should have been participating in and leading over. But in the time the kings went off to war, David wasn't where he was supposed to be. So David, on the other side of all this, is confronted by the prophet Nathan, and he's told overtly, because of your sin, the child born to you is going to die. David received it and immediately confessed his sin, is repentant, comes under God's discipline. The sword never leaves David's life. Never leaves David's household. Like his family, meaning his own children, would kill each other, and it was terrible. But David himself is still that man after God's own heart, and God's blessings are upon David, and David is restored to the throne of Israel, and it's redemption. To this day, he's celebrated. But in his confession, Psalm 51, which we also preached, I think, in our series, was it the Songs of Korah? We've been doing Psalms for a while. I've known since the beginning of this open sequence. We've got 150 Psalms, and that's going to take a year to do. So I've been sort of doing Psalms in advance before the actual Psalm series so that we end up covering all 150 Psalms. But I'll provide you, if you want to do all 150 Psalms, I'll provide you with kind of links or a database. We're also working on a search feature on JCM's website, so you could just see all the Psalms, even though they come from different series. But in all of these Psalms, we can see echoes from David of his own reflections on what it was like after that confrontation. When he was told that his child died, he had been beyond despondent, not eating, just weeping all the time, pleading with God. And all of his advisors, his counselors, his cupbearer perhaps, all the people who were around David, think of it like the cabinet at the White House, all of his advisors, they're all worried about him. And everybody thinks that, oh man, this is touch and go. Bathsheba is going to make it, but it doesn't look like the baby's going to make it. Who's going to be the one to tell him if the baby dies? And then what is he going to do? Is David going to kill himself when he finds out that the baby's dead? And so they are terrified. And when they break the news to him, he responds in a weird way. He gets up and he starts eating. And he washes his face and changes his clothes and just suddenly acts like he's okay. And then that's what sets off his advisors. And they're like, okay, what gives? You were on suicide watch 5 minutes ago. And then we just gave you the worst news ever. And now you're past the Carolina gold sauce. Wait, he wouldn't have eaten pork. Never mind. Everyone's weirded out by this. And then David says something in answering that question. He's like, before, who knows? God may have changed his mind. God may have shown mercy. It may have been God's will after all that I don't really lose a child to Bathsheba and I don't really lose our baby, that our baby doesn't really die. Maybe instead it was disciplinary from God. It was a testing of faith from God. I mean, God told Abraham to kill Isaac and then allowed Isaac to live in the end after all. Who knows, but that God may have spared this child. But now the child is gone. And the child, David says, has gone down to Sheol. I will go to him, but he will not return to me. David said this about the son born to him and Bathsheba. That son of mine, of ours, will go down to Sheol. And I will go down there with him, but he will not come from Sheol back to here. Sheol, place of the dead, two different experiences. Righteous up here with Abraham, the unrighteous down here in Tartarus and suffering. There's a chasm between. If Jesus' parable in Luke 16 is analogous to the state of things, for what happens when you die in the Old Testament, whether you're righteous or unrighteous, You both go to Sheol, or in Greek, Hades. But the righteous ones are in this elevated position within Sheol, where Abraham is there, and it looks nice. And then the unrighteous are in a place of suffering. This changes with Jesus' death upon the cross. But for David, Sheol was the place of the dead. He believed that he would see his son again. When he said, I will go down to him, he's saying, I'll be with my son one day when I die, and he's waiting for me in Sheol. But he's not going to resurrect. He's not going to come out of Sheol. Once you go to Sheol, you don't really come back. That's a resurrection. We've got a prophet, the worst prophet of all, Jonah, whom we suspect in a less popular, but I think quite plausible interpretation of Jonah chapter 2. Jonah describes himself going to Sheol. He describes his own head being covered with seaweed. And I think it's quite possible that Jonah died. Hence Sheol, hence seaweed wrapping around your neck. I think that it's possible Jonah, the worst prophet of all, actually had one of the most Christ-like prophetic ministries by way of this possible interpretation that he died and was resurrected. And that would then, for me, properly frame what Jesus said to the wicked generation that was demanding signs and wonders. He'd feed the 5,000, and they're like, okay, that's cool. What sign are you going to give us to prove that you're the Messiah? And he's like, I just fed possibly 15,000 people. And this is the second time I've done this. Like, you ate some of the food. And you're asking me what sign I'm going to give you to prove to you that I'm God? No sign, but one. The sign of Jonah. In the same way that Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days. Now, that interpretation of the sign of Jonah gives rise to some confusion that actually led to an editing of the Apostles' Creed. There are some old school versions of the Apostles' Creed that describe Jesus going to hell. The song put out by Hillsong, the Creed, I Believe, used descended into darkness. So this is a different subject for a different day, but it's worth bringing up to explain this text. What happened when Jesus died on the cross? Where did Jesus go? Because he said that today you'll be with me in paradise, to the man on the cross next to him. And there are all these prophecies in all these teachings in 1 Peter chapter 3 that seem to indicate en route to paradise, he made a proclamation to demonic spirits that gave rise to the Nephilim in Genesis 6. This is echoed in Jude. So if that interpretation is accurate, then Jesus' death upon the cross gives way to him making a proclamation to these demons bound in utter darkness, and then ascends, and he's in paradise. So then the resurrection takes place, and Jesus appears to over 500 believers. He shows up behind locked doors and gives Thomas a week to believe without seeing, blessing those who believe without seeing. That's most believers everywhere, right? We've got 500 something believers who saw, but the vast majority of believers have not yet seen the resurrected Jesus. We will one day. So it's another subject for another day, like what exactly happened when Jesus died on the cross. When that text arises, I think it'll come in our study of 1 Peter. When we get to chapter 3, we'll spend a lot of time on it because it's one of the most difficult chapters in the whole New Testament to accurately interpret. And I'll lay out kind of the buffet of interpretations like we did with Revelation. But Lord, you brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. I think this is prophetic about Jesus. I think that this is prophetic about the resurrection of Jesus. Lord, you will not let your Holy One see decay. has cultural implications, and it's the reason why Jesus was deliberately late when he heard the news while he was in Bethany about Lazarus' death. He had adequate time to be there while Lazarus was still on his deathbed alive, but he deliberately delayed, and he gets the news that the one you love is dead, and then he goes. And when he arrives there, Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. And Jesus is even kind of warned, Lord, he's been in there 4 days. In Hebrew culture, that means like you are really good and dead. And decay has started to set in. And he's warned in what must have been an awkward thing to say, Jesus, there's going to be a smell in there. Because Lazarus is not just dead, he's like 4 days dead. Can you see now why the resurrection took place on the 3rd day? And the Psalms that prophesy your Holy One will not see decay. In the Hebrew culture, that means that he's not in the grave long enough to decay. He resurrects on the 3rd day. It's all about Jesus. All of Scripture is ultimately about Jesus. You can see how this is a psalm of gratitude. It says at the superscript that it's a dedication song for the house of David. And David, however, by his own words after the death of his son, David never went to Sheol and came back. When he was told that his child died, he articulated a clear biblical understanding that that was not possible. So he's not singing about himself. David never had a death and resurrection experience. In fact, the tomb of David was well known in the New Testament. And in the book of Acts, when explaining the gospel to a crowd of Jews, it's pointed out, we know where David is. He's dead and he's buried. We can go visit his tomb. But there is no such tomb for Jesus. Go to the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And Jesus is not in there to this day. So this talk about rising up from Sheol, I believe that David is prophesying the capital S son of David generations later. That's Jesus, who is from the line of David. I believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of what was prophesied right here. I look at this text in Psalm 30 and I see the gospel of Jesus Christ foreshadowed. Do you see it too?